Wonderful. Oh, everybody's back. Complete with food. Just don't forget to take your trash out with you when you leave. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, now the good part. And before we start, again, in case you just got here, we have the Tribune with us today, and they will be doing an article, and they are taking photos. And if for any reason you do not want your picture taken, just put your hand up like this, and she won't use it. So that's how she'll know who does not want to be photographed. Okay, that's a good way. to remember that. Now, the best part. We're so lucky to have Steve Fanning with us again today. He was one of our early speakers, not too long after your experience.
It was 4 years ago.
4 years ago, he was a speaker for us. And he has since continued to evolve, and it'll be interesting to hear the developments that have changed over the last 4 years, as well as to hear his absolutely amazing and wonderful experience. So, as you probably know, he's a professor of history at the University of Illinois in Chicago. He's written a number of articles and books, and is the Mystics book the last one? No. Mystics. Mystics of the Christian Tradition resulted. His near-death experience resulted in an interest in mysticism, and he produced this book, which is quite wonderful. I have it as well, and I've enjoyed it. And you can tell us everything else. Please give a warm welcome for Steve Fanning.
I was here last month to hear Danny and Brinkley. Is this at volumes already on this? Okay. Loud? Louder like that? Okay. And I thought, oh great, I get to follow Danny and Brinkley. That's really wonderful. It's right at it. And in fact, the last kind of talk that I gave, I had to follow what's his name? Andrew Hart.
Wow.
Andrew Harvey. I don't know if you know him. He's done books on mysticism and Eastern thought, and he is a dynamo, kind of wacky dynamo, kind of like Danny Brinkley. And I thought, somehow then I come in to calm everyone down, take it nice and easy, no reason to get excited about all of this. And the last time I spoke at IANDS was 4 years ago when we were still meeting in the church basement. Any of you here then? Mm-hmm. A few. It was a little chummier in a way because it was nice. I could kind of reach out and touch everyone, and this is looking back into the distance there. But as Diane said, I'm going to hear all the gruesome details now about the experience and the consequences. I think the research that's been done on near-death experiences often doesn't really go far enough. Very often, I think there's been too much fixation on the tunnel and all of that stuff. And what I really feel is that the near-death experiences just keeps going on and on and on because of the consequences and effects that it has. And that's why kind of Diane mentioned kind of evolution, because the consequences are not all evident by the time things are over. I don't know if anybody saw that program on near-death experiences on Fox TV. Was it shown in October? I think it was. And I was interviewed on that, and of course they did an hour of interviews, and I ended up with about 20 seconds of screen time. And they had a guy who had a car fall on him, and a guy shot in the head. And there was me who had an asthma attack, and I thought, I guess it would make a good story. It's kind of like, I hadn't really experienced because of hives or something. It's just, kind of, asthma can kill you, and so that's what happened to me. So I'll just launch into it and see what happens. It's funny. The first 3 years after my experience, I didn't give much conscious thought to the near-death experience. In fact, for me, that wasn't what the story was really all about. It wasn't until I met Neil Grossman, a fellow faculty member at UIC, who teaches on near-death experiences, I found out there were such things. And that there's books and thousands of books that written on it, and it's a paradigm, and it really disturbed me at first. greatly, and then I found comfort in it. It disturbed me at first because I thought the experience I had was all mine, personal, given to me. Nobody else had it, and it was really special. And then I found I'm a pattern now, and part of the stereotype. For me, the story was really much more about the illness that this all resulted from, and I'll be talking about that. So I have to get part of my interest here, too, what I think was as significant as the near-death experience. But the whole problem started with an asthma attack. I used to have extremely severe asthma. I usually, for about 3 or 4 years, would end up hospitalized 3 to 4 times a year, always in intensive care, because my lungs had this tendency just to stop working suddenly, and which is rather distressing. And so I'd had several close calls, but this event happened in 1988 when I was in London. I was to give a paper at a conference, but the night before the conference, my asthma just went crazy. It was a very bad air quality day in London. They were giving warnings about people with pulmonary problems to stay inside, but when you're a visitor, you don't get those. So my lungs simply shut down. I went into pulmonary arrest. I was taken to St. Bartholomew's Hospital, entered there, and my lungs were simply not working. I was put on a respirator. And the medicine they were giving me was not working. And so this was part of the real problem. I was in a coma for 2 weeks. The first week was my lungs simply didn't work. I was put on a respirator. My lungs were so bad that the respirator would shut down because of the blockage. And they would then keep me alive by bagging me by hand, a little bag they use, the little squeeze thing. That's why I'm alive today, because these wonderful people in London would do this for hours on end, keeping some air rushing in. And they were certain I was going to die. All the nursing strategy was based on that. Their treatment was based on that. And they even, this is literally true, they contacted my family and said somebody should come pick up my body. Well, but like Mark Twain said, the stories of my demise were greatly exaggerated. Not by much. So for a week, that was the situation. And then my breathing I started breathing again. And then something happened, I never knew what, but I had a fever of about 105. They were packing me in ice. I had some kind of a seizure. They did a spinal tap. They tried to figure this out. They never figured out what that was. And then after a week of that, then things seemed calm, and I started coming out of the coma. Something had happened though in that 2-week period I was in a coma. Not only the near-death experience, but something else. The little fun part of it was, as I started coming out of the coma, I was paralyzed from the neck down, and they thought it was going to be permanent. That's also what I woke up to. Because the damage to nerve fibers and nerve sheaths was massive and all over my body, from eyes to feet. So that was the welcome back part of the illness. And I can say, so for me, what was a very gripping event was to face being a quadriplegic and being told this is the rest of your life, probably. And I'll be getting into what happened afterwards. I'll talk about what occurred somewhere in this 2-week period. I have no idea when it happened at all. And to talk about it, you have to explain things sequentially. But this is not doing justice to what it was, because it wasn't sequential. It was just kind of all at once, kind of a pow thing. And so I'll try to do my best to explain it sequentially. From what I remember, and there might have been more, I don't know. My memory was badly affected by being very ill. So I don't know that I remember it all, but this is what I remember, and remember clearly to this day, as if it were, had just happened. I was in a place, and I don't know what this place was. It'd be really nice if things had labels on them. Then you could say I was in heaven or limbo or whatever. I have no idea. I was in a place, and the place was all one color. It was all kind of a light blue, a blue-gray color. Sort of if there was a ground, sea, sky, everything was just one color. And I was very interested. Daniel Brinkley talks about this as well. He mentioned it last month if you were here. And he also has in his book, Saved by the Light, which I read and I found this was fascinating. And you find this color coming up actually quite a lot. Phyllis Atwater talks about it as well, as do some others. So I was in this place. No terrain, just a place. Over here on this side of me, there was something. I always just say a being. I never saw the being. If it had a label on it, I didn't get to see it. All I did was feel the being. And the feeling was of size and power, strength over here. And so I was constantly feeling the being. And the next part was the part which had a tremendous, probably the most tremendous effect, was the life review. I said, now thanks to Neil and thanks to the reading that I've done, now I've got a label for it. The life review. I have to say, it's a little, for me, a bit different than what Daniel Brinkley described. He talks about experiencing every last detail of your life, if you remember that. Even to the point of how many hairs in the nose of the doctor that looked at you. I think it would be a terribly boring life review. For me, it was all about significant events. And it wasn't a watching of these events, it was a re-experiencing. Those of you who read this literature, this is the way it was. It was being there again, in the event, re-experiencing it. But it was from, again, this was much neater when it was my personal experience. Daniel Brinkley had it, and thousands of others have too. It was experiencing these events from 3 different perspectives, angles, experiences simultaneously. One was my version of events. I was just there again, and it was really focusing on what was going on inside of me, what I was thinking, what I was feeling, what my motivations were. And these actually were all times of conflict. And so I was there, with my thoughts, rationalizations, again, in times of conflict. It was kind of the normal kinds of things when you're in deep emotional conflict with someone. Sometimes somebody goes way too far, they push you just too far, they've been such a rotten person for so long, and you've had it up to here, and finally you let them have it. And you feel good about it, because they've been asking for it. And you feel perfectly justified. But then I had the other person's experience, and I felt the sting and the pain of those words. And I realized these words have meaning and power, and they're just as painful whether the other person realizes they have it coming or not. And then since I was in the middle of their thoughts and their motivations, they didn't think they had it coming. And I felt that sting, and that was a very shocking and kind of painful thing to go through. But then, the real shocker was the third view. And this was what was really happening. Sometimes I call it God's eye view. Not my lies to myself and self-justification, or somebody else's lies to themselves and their self-justification, but seeing through it all, and it's really seeing, shockingly, how much we all lie to ourselves. So I'm extrapolating from me to all we. Not my problem, it's us. No, it really was how we do this. And how the worst part of it for me was how we believe our own lies to ourselves. We're that good at lying to ourselves. Well, that was the worst thing. And Atwater talks about this for herself, about having it be kind of a hellish experience. I'll say it was true. It was shocking. I felt, in a way, humiliated. I thought, I felt like a failure. It was a self-judgment that I had really failed as a human being not to be aware of this and to be oblivious to all of this. And this is where the being came in. And the message that came in was, it's okay, you're only human. Which meant to me, it's okay because that's what humans do. You're merely being a human. Whereas I think I interpreted I was a mere human, and that's what hurt too. I thought I had far greater aspirations than mere humanity. I thought I was living in, well, that's how much you can lie to yourself. So to me, it's okay, you're only human, but I thought it's not okay because we can do better. And so for me, the real point was, well, when it was all over with, the point was, when I'm in this position again, I want it to be different. I don't want to have this sense of failure and not being sensitive and aware. What I want the judgment to be, well, at least he tried. Not much comfort, but it was a step up anyway. And so, yeah, the message from the being was comforting. Then after that, I received a series of revelations about my own family. My parents, my brother, my sister, myself. And at last I understood the family dynamics. We were just kind of a typical screwed up, dysfunctional family. Kind of ordinary stuff. And I've always been kind of resentful of my parents. I thought they really hadn't done a very good job at being parents. And now I saw what was really going on, and I realized they were just flawed human beings doing the best they could with the limitations they had, which was no worse than I'd just seen about myself. Which was really nice because years of anger, festering anger, were gone. But now I really understood. But kind of the bad part is I understood the sick family dynamics that I've been participating in, that I no longer wanted to have anything to do with, which can make you a real pain when you come back. Then, after that, I found myself, I can always say, it felt like the center of the universe. It was space. And around me were stars, galaxies, nebulae, three-dimensional color, the most beautiful sight I've ever seen. Just, if I were still breathing, breathtaking. Breathtaking beauty. And what was, to me, the most significant part was I felt rays of belonging to everything in the universe. That just ties to everything that I was seeing. Which is a profound feeling to have. Really feeling of belonging to the universe. And everything being connected. And everything really in the end being one. Then after that, I received some more revelations. This was, I now knew everything. A very dangerous thing to feel, but I did. I really felt like I knew. Now, this is not the mathematics that had always bothered me in school. This was really just knowing how things are. I understood now how everything worked and what everything was all about. Just complete knowledge, it felt like. And then after that, I was shown visions of the future concerning myself and my kids. I had two children. At the time, my son was 15 and my daughter was 10. And I saw problems that they were going to be having. And I really felt that I knew that I needed to be there to help them out. And I don't know, I can't say I made a decision or I wasn't given a choice, but I just knowledge him, I have to be there. They're going to need me. And then I started coming back into my body, started waking up, which was actually a fairly difficult thing because I've been heavily sedated for quite a long time and had massive amounts of medicine of all varieties pumped in. As I started coming back, I had a series of, worlds that I would come into. There were about 4 or 5 of them, and they were all the same. And I would kind of rotate from one to another and just kind of keep going around. One was this very weird hospital in a strange land filled with nurses and doctors from all over the world. England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, Australia, the US. And I was in immense pain in this world and paralyzed. And the pain was really horrible. And they kept giving me things and it didn't work. And then I would go to another world. One of them was I was none of this makes any sense at all. I was in kind of a drug house in Chinatown in San Francisco, an opium den, filled with lots of Chinese people. And they were feeding me lots of this wonderful opium, except it had me paralyzed. It was very pleasant, though. One of them was I was off in the north woods of Minnesota, of all things, in this kitchen, in a hospital bed, nice, warm, glowing, yellow light, very nice. There was a nurse there, and she was taking care of me. I was listening to WCCO radio in Minneapolis, listening to a Minnesota Twins game. And that was very nice, too. And so there were about 5 or 6 of these, and in all of them I was paralyzed. And most of them I wasn't in pain. I just go from one there, and there were no variety, just one to the next. And finally, the weird hospital tended to be there more often than the others. But I had trouble accepting it as reality. I thought it was a dream, or a bad dream, actually, a nightmare, because, and this is what Diane was talking about earlier, it was so pale in comparison with where I'd been. It was like being in a dream, and I couldn't believe it was true. It's just that after, I don't know, in time, all the others disappeared, and I was stuck there in this weird hospital in horrible pain, and I was paralyzed and being told this was going to be the rest of my life. I think it was good that I had this experience, because my feeling now is, I was concerned about being paralyzed, but I did have a feeling that everything was going to be okay somehow. Because one of the things I had seen in the revelations I've been given and in the life review was that every single thing that had happened to me had happened for a purpose. It had meaning and significance. Even the crappiest stuff wasn't bad luck. It had meaning. And I was left with the firm idea, I now knew the purpose of life. And the purpose of life was to learn. And the only way you learn is by having a challenge, trouble, or difficulty. If everything is fine, why change? You stay right where you are. So I really saw that even the worst things in life are there for a reason. Life is purposeful. And so if I stayed like that, it would somehow be okay, but of course that wasn't my first choice. After 4 weeks in intensive care, and finally my lungs had stabilized and the other problems had stabilized, I was moved to a neurological ward there at St. Bartholomew's Hospital in London. And of course I was paralyzed, and so I had round-the-clock nursing, thanks to Her Majesty's government. And about every 8 hours, got a new nurse. And sometimes I never saw them again, sometimes I'd be there a day or two, sometimes even more. But this was, I think it was the first day I was there, and of course this nurse had to feed me. And it was clear she didn't like having to do this. Kind of, I think, disgusted with it, which really ticked me off. Because this had not really, was not something of my own choice, I don't think. Maybe it was. But, it was really, and that made me mad. And the wackiest thing is, I said, this was, I think, on a Monday, I said, by Friday or Saturday, I'm going to feed myself. I'll show her. At the time, this was what I could do. I could lift my shoulder. Now, why that thought came to me, I don't know. But I went to work at this by, I don't know where these ideas came, what stuff I'd read or inspiration or what. I just tried to bring up all the energy in my body, just suck it up from feet into shoulder and try to make that shoulder raise up even higher, as much as I could. And some of you heard this before, I apologize, but I only have about 3 or 4 jokes. When you're a quadriplegic, there's not a lot you can do to occupy your day. So you've got lots of time to do this. So I was there just trying to pull all the energy in my body up into my shoulder. At the same time, I felt an outside energy coming into me. And I could, in my mind's eye, I could see it, and I knew it was real. It was like electricity. It was flowing in my body, and I took it to be divine energy. It also didn't have a label, frustratingly enough, but that's what it was to me. And so the thought came to me, I don't know if I will ever move or walk, but if I don't cooperate with this, I know I will. So I tried to just cooperate with it and bring it in. I got moving it higher and higher. Of course, I was lying flat on my back. got to raise my arm up off the bed and it would come down. I got my arm up over my face, it would crash down. And I really beat myself up pretty well. And I got movement in it. And so by Friday morning, a different nurse came in bringing my morning toast. I said, I will feed myself. And she just looked at me and said, show me. So I had them put the tray up here. I reached out and grabbed the toast and just shoved it into my mouth. It was a ugly scene, but I had fed myself. And I wouldn't let them feed me anymore. Even when we had stew. I would rake my hand through the stew and pick up what pieces I could and just shove it in. I was not going to let them feed me. I think there's some pride problems here. And then I went to work on this arm doing the same thing. And within about 2 more days, I got movement here. And that was pretty interesting too. So now they're just my legs. And I was getting down to about 2 days from coming home, which is going to be interesting because I couldn't move my legs. And it's not easy to come home in a paralyzed state when you're overseas. You have to, I had to have a doctor and a nurse licensed in the U.S. come over. I had to buy 6 airline seats in the middle of the summer. And this is not 14-day advance purchase. And they bolted down 3 seats and bolted a stretcher on top of it. And so that was how I came back. So this was a couple days just before this, and I had another terrible night with the pain. Had trouble sleeping, and I just kept trying. What I'd been doing all along with the pain in my legs was, somewhere it came to me that pain is worse if you resist, if you fight it. So I tried as best I could to try to welcome the pain in. I would say, come in, pain, my friend. And if you welcome it in, it'll just diffuse through your body. And so that's what I've been trying to do. Well, the pain was really awful this night. And so I just kept trying to do that, and I dozed off. And I woke up, I don't know, maybe an hour later, and I thought, something feels different. And I lifted both my legs up off the bed. And that was pretty exciting. And so in the morning, when they came in, this is St. Bartholomew's Hospital in London, they, a little more on the primitive side, I thought. Instead of having the bed with the motor that raises you up, there was kind of a lattice work, which they would bring out from the bed and put in position, put the pillows up there and then scoot you up. So I came in the morning to do that, and I said, I can do that. And I raised my heels up to my butt and kicked, and just went shooting right up, which of course stunned them. And then about an hour later, I heard footsteps running down the hall. This was the neurologist, who 2 weeks earlier had told me that I would probably be paralyzed the rest of my life. He said, they just told me, show me, show me. So I did again, pulled my heels up to my butt, kicked and just shoved myself up. And he looked at me like this. He said, sometimes our prognosis tends to be a bit gloomy. He said, I have no explanation for how you're able to do this. So then I came home and was taken to Rush Presbyterian Hospital on the west side of Chicago, close to campus. And I was put in a pulmonary ward, I guess because of my lungs, which were still not in very good shape. And was jet lagged, woke up about 4 a.m., nothing to do. So I still had I was paralyzed, well, all paralysis was gone except for my left foot. So I began sending the energy into that. The second morning, the same thing happened. I began putting the energy in, and about 7 o'clock, my foot moved. So now I thought, everything is moving. I wonder if I can walk. This is insane. I don't know if you keep up with this. Plus, I had lost 60 pounds. All my muscle mass was gone. Every muscle I had was gone or atrophied or had literally holes in the muscle from whatever happened. But I swung my legs over the bed and stood up. It was just like this, and which was an exciting moment. So then I got the tray, where they had the food on, and I cranked it up to this height, leaned over, and I pushed myself around the room. practicing walking. By the way, this room had a television monitor in it, and the monitor of the nurse's station. After about 30 minutes, a nurse came down. And I don't know if she had read my chart or not. She said, "Are you having trouble with your walking?" I said, "A little, yeah, I am, but it's getting better." So I did that, and I entered a rehabilitation unit at Rush Presbyterian. They just opened it up. This was summer of '88, and I was the first graduate to leave the rehab unit. And I had to work on walking because I had lost all muscle memory. I didn't remember how to walk. And so what I was trying to do was just have a perfect balance, over the middle part. And so I was walking. It's kind of this weird S shape because all the muscles you use to hold your body up were basically gone. So it was one of my exercises was practice holding the trunk up. And I could only do it for a few minutes and I would go down. But so I had to learn how to walk again. It reminded me of my son when he was learning to walk. We called him Lurch when he was walking, and now I had become Lurch. It's a very strange sensation to learn this again. But for me, the highlight of the whole experience was when I was leaving the hospital. The neurologists had never seen anything like this before. They'd never seen the pattern of nerve damage before. They had no idea what was going on. So I had EMGs every day. Have you ever had those? It's like you know what they're like.
Heard about it.
That's where they take an electrode and they smash it really hard in, take another one and smash it really hard in, and then zap you. And they time how long it takes for the zap to go through you. And I had them, because the damage went all the way up to here. They would do it in my eyebrows, and my eyes, my lips, and it was not much fun. But I did it every day. So as I was leaving the hospital, the neurologist, as I was walking out of the hospital, the neurologist looked at me and said, "You don't know it, but you can't walk." He said, "The damage is so massive, there's no physiological way that you can do this." And he said, he's just like the doctor, and he said, "There's no explanation for how this is happening." And that was actually a stunner, because I knew a miracle had happened, but I thought the miracle was that the damage had been somehow fixed, supernaturally. What was weird was the damage hadn't been fixed. And yet, I was having movement. So then I had to try going home. And again, my muscle damage was immense. I found that almost every door was too much for me. I had trouble turning any doorknob because I had, my hand muscles were gone. It took both hands to pick up a gallon of milk. And then, so I was in very weak condition. I had about a month before the start of the fall quarter, and I had to continue with physical rehabilitation and rebuild every muscle in my body, which was kind of a nice challenge. But and also, the other challenge was rehabilitating myself, because I had seen, like I said, when I go back into that life review again, I want my verdict to be different. I want it to be, well, at least he tried. So I had to reshape my life. I did it by kind of going into isolation. I kind of withdrew from the world to a great extent. I mean, I did make it back and taught my classes, and then I would immediately come home and nap because the fatigue was terrible. But I kind of went into isolation now because I was divorced, and my kids were with me half of each week, and so I would be with them. But the rest of the time, I just kind of stayed out and felt like the only way you can remake yourself is to kind of pull back. Fall back and regroup and work on these things. And so that's what I did. For me, one of the strangest things about the changes was I got out of the hospital. First time I'd seen my apartment in 2 months. Opened up the closet door and I said, "What idiot bought these clothes?" I hated all my clothes. It was just the most amazing thing. So I had that, and I had to try redoing that as well. So then I just kind of worked at rehabilitating myself, rebuilding my life. And then the near-death experience, I told to almost no one. Again, because I didn't have a label for it. It was my gift. And I felt somewhat, I still feel somewhat protective of it, even though I do talk in public about it. So, and by the way, the scenes of the future that I was shown concerning my children happened. exactly as they were seen. And because there are people around whose feelings could be hurt, I hope they don't get pressed to talk more graphically about this, but I knew I'd be needing to go to court on their behalf. So I started instantly saving money, even though I was now flat broke because the repatriation fee, the return from London, my insurance wouldn't cover. They said, just wait until you can walk. And the prognosis was never, and I didn't understand. Well, anyway, they wouldn't pay, and so I put it on my American Express card, which, you can't carry that in very long. And so I was financially wiped out, but I started putting money away in my go-to-court fund. And when the events came true, I was ready. I could do it. I had the money. That's a very handy revelation, by the way. This is practical revelation. So that's kind of it. So I spent a couple of years trying to institute the practical consequences of what I had seen. Another weird thing that happened was, now before this all happened, I'd been a fairly devout agnostic. And really, I was raised in a very fundamentalist church down in Texas, and by the time we parted on bad terms, when I was about 18, I really was somewhat angry and had no real use for organized religion. For some strange reason, I knew I had to go back to church. And this is the weirdest part of all, I think. I had to be the Episcopal Church. And I can't explain why. Except now I realize that it works out well with my anger towards organized religion, because the Episcopal Church is not an organized religion. It's chaotic and wacky. Any Episcopalian? You know what I mean. And so and I guess I can also talk about kind of the consequences of some of the consequences of what happened to me. One of the things that I saw was that there's no real self to ourselves. This is part of the revelations that came. Also came out because of, as I was there as a quadriplegic, lying there, thinking, I can't do almost anything. Am I a different person now? How would I define myself? Would I define myself as a person who moves? I can't move, but I'm not different. But the revelations that came, I saw that there is no self to ourselves. That this thing we call ourselves, I think, could use a psychological term, is really the ego, which has nothing to do with us. That there probably is some kind of core to us, but it's nothing we would recognize. And so that really helps if you think about this self that you spend so much time defending is a fiction. It has nothing really to do with you, which really I think has helped immensely in life to realize that if somebody is having some difficulty with me, they can say it all they want to, because that has nothing to do with me. It's this image that they see. Well, Diane wanted me to spend some time talking about one of the weirder consequences as well. I'm always somewhat hesitant to talk about this because there are a couple of things a person should never claim about themselves, I think. One is a person should never claim to be a mystic. Mystics are people who have somehow managed to suppress the ego. And claiming to be mystic is the ego proclaiming its status. There's something wrong here. In fact, one of the things I put in my book on mystics of the Christian tradition is, in the tradition of the earliest Christian mystics, one never claimed mystical experiences for oneself. That if one talked about these things, they would ascribe them to another person. I know a man who experienced this. So you shouldn't. Another one is, I think you should never claim to be a healer. But one of the weirdest things that came out of this was my involvement in healing. And thanks to, again, Neil and my exposure to near-death experience literature, you probably know this is one of the most common side effects of near-death experiences. Various psychic powers, and among them, about the most common is healing. Now, I guess maybe this was the preparation of this was my own healing. I don't know. I was prepared for the idea of divine healing, supernatural healing. But 3 years passed, and a bit more, and my daughter, who was then 13, was having a really bad headache. And I'd given her some Tylenol. It did nothing. And then a voice came. And the voice said, "You can help her." And that just about freaked me out, frankly. And I wouldn't do anything. And then I felt bad about that, because I felt I'd been healed by responding to messages like that. So I made the old desperation bargain. If this happens again, then I'll do something. But damn it, it did. 2 weeks later, the scenario reenacted. My daughter had the headache, tying onto the apple, and a damn voice. This is like I feel the dreams. The voice inside my head said, "You can help her." So what I did was, now I had to do something because I said it would. So I just put my fingers like this on either side of her temple, held them there for about 10 seconds, and pulled them away. And she looked at me in surprise and said, "How'd you do that? It's gone." Sure, guys. Right, something happened with that. But then my daughter is a real athlete, and so for me, luckily, she kept hurting herself. And I would just put my hand on, and it would be fine. Once she thought she broke her arm. She had fallen like this in softball. So I put my hands around her wrist, and I just kind of tried to put energy in, and after about 30 seconds, I pulled my hand away, and she said, "Hey, it's fine now." Weird stuff like that. But to me, it was a message, and it really felt like this is something that I should be doing. How do you get started in this kind of stuff? So I really misspent, it wasn't really misspent, but it felt like it, about 5 or 6 years looking for a guru, looking for somebody to tell me what to do. And it all came to nothing. It was nothing but frustration. I found more clerics who will look you in the eye and lie to you than you can imagine. And for a while, I gave it up for a while. For 2 years, I keep a journal about this healing stuff, and I put almost everything in there from the very beginning. And for 2 years, there's nothing. Because I just said, I don't need this aggravation. Then it started up again, and I've been doing it since then. So this is about 14 years now. So I can just tell you what it feels like, and then I don't know, do with it what you want. I found that with my hands, I can feel, I call it, I don't know what it is, disruption of energy. I think that's what I call it. I can only feel when something's wrong. If somebody's fine, I feel nothing. But I feel where there's a problem. And it feels kind of like, I don't know, kind of like it's a magnetic feel. Kind of like if you take two ends of the north poles of a magnet, push it together, you know how they resist each other. You can't see anything, but you can feel it. That's something about what it feels like in these shapes of this energy. I mean, the disrupted energy has shapes. And you feel mounds and ridges and holes, and sometimes feels like horns, kind of conical shape. And so what I try to do is smooth out that disruption until I feel like, okay, time to stop now. So I like when Neil introduced me to near-death experiences, I began reading everything I could about them. When this whole thing started, I started reading everything I could about healing. And so I picked up a lot of ideas about it, but I really felt that you should go with your own experiences. So basically, this is just, I kind of read about healing touch, therapeutic touch, Reiki, various kinds of touches, and just kind of follow my instincts and try to respond to them. But this is a very strange world to be in. Because this is not magic. You can't say a magic word or do a magic thing and somebody gets healed. Healing is a very strange world to be in. Sometimes you do something and somebody gets healed. Next time you do it, they don't. And I even went to Scotland and talked to healers there and asked a healer there, been doing this for about 10 years. At the time I said, why is it? Why is it that way? Why? Because sometimes it just doesn't work. And he said, I'll tell you, the man that I studied healing with has been doing this for 40 years. That was his question. I didn't think there was an answer to this. But it does keep you humble. It makes you realize you're not doing something, that somebody else, something else is doing this. And also, a lot of problems are not physiological problems. One of my favorite experiences was a friend of mine that asked me to work on her neck. She had a really bad neck. And I didn't feel anything wrong at all. I thought, well, maybe it's me. So I worked away, moved my hand around, and nothing happened. So after about 3 times, again, I never felt a thing, and so finally it came to me, and I said, Fran, who's the pain in the neck in your life? Oh, my husband, she said. He wasn't working. She was providing the sole support, working in a department store. He had one get-rich quick scheme after another, and it was driving her nuts. And all of that anger, frustration, it manifested in her neck. She said, I've been meaning to talk with him. We've got to get a plan worked out. I said, maybe it'd be a good idea. She called me up the next morning and said, Steve, you healed my neck. We had the talk. We got a plan. We got a schedule. He agreed on the schedule. I woke up this morning and my neck is fine. I could have waved my hand around her neck for years and it wouldn't have done a thing. So you always have to be prepared for that. So, in terms of evolution, this stuff just keeps kind of evolving. I have new experiences, and I keep trying to learn new things, and it's sort of a matter of just being prepared for the unexpected as best you can. So I think that's all that I have to say. I'd like to leave time for questions and answers, because a lot of you have interesting insights and things to say, or like things you'd like to ask, and so I think it's time to put things wide open. There's a question, pardon me, there's a light right here in the back. Yeah?
Were you able to heal yourself from the asthma?
Was I able to heal myself from the asthma? It's much, much better now. And I don't know whether it's because of the experience or this kind of thing I have to work on. I did find you could do some things. One of the weirdest experiences in the hospital, of course, again, just because I was now conscious, my lungs were still weak and fragile. And in order to get home, I had to pass a pulmonary function test. They couldn't let me on an airplane still when I might have another attack. So this was 3 days before I was supposed to come back. My lungs were doing pretty well. And then they had a fill-in doctor come. It was called a locum tenens in England. He was from the Indian subcontinent, don't know where. And he looked at my chart and decided that all of my treatment was wrong. Now I was the prize patient in St. Bartholomew's. And the meter getting me breathing was really something. And he decided to change it. First of all, he said, you have to take a peak flow test. Earlier, they had determined, this was back here in Chicago, that my lungs spasm extremely easily. And I've been warned by pulmonary specialists never take a peak flow test, because that alone can make my lungs spasm. Now I'll have a severe attack. He said, take this peak flow, where you blow into something and see how the air is moving through. And I wouldn't do it. And he ordered me to, and I wouldn't do it. He shoved it into my mouth and made me do it. He changed all my medicine. And I was getting pretty stressed out. Wheezing was getting in pretty badly. Well, luckily my brother was there. When they said for somebody to come pick up my body, my poor brother came, expecting to be there 2 or 3 days. Instead, here I was, 6 weeks later, still alive. He was stuck in England with me. But he went running for the other doctors. So they came on the scene and took over and put everything back. And then a very interesting thing happened. About a couple hours later, a man came to my bed. There were 4 of us in the ward, and he said, "Professor Fanning." I thought, "This is weird. They've always called me Stephen." Suddenly, I'm Professor Fanning. And he apologized. He said that was a fill-in. He comes in to give some relief. We've had some troubles with him in the past. He's now sacked. And I want to apologize most heartily for all of this. And, well, anyway, so here I was supposed to take a breathing test later that day, and my lungs were just rasping. It was terrible. So now I went to work on myself. Again, using visualization technique, trying to pour energy into my lungs and trying to make them calm down. And by mid-afternoon, when the pulmonary guy came, I was ready for him. Things were doing pretty well. But I had to take another peak flow test. This was a requirement. So I huffed and puffed and huffed and puffed and huffed and puffed. And he'd forgotten to put batteries in it. He was most apologetic, but he had no data. So now I was wheezing again. So we went to get batteries and put them in. Now I was, again, trying to calm down, make my lungs stop it. Another pulmonary test, I huffed and puffed. They got a readout, and it was wonderful. It was so wonderful, he couldn't believe it was true. He made me do another one. I thought, God, had my life get worse? Here it is. Anyways, I did another one, and it was wonderful. So finally, that was when I got the okay to come home. So yeah, I can do a little bit of stuff on myself, but I think it's limited. And I think that's for a reason, because I think if you have some kind of ability like this, it's not for yourself. It's for other people. I remember watching Sylvia Browne talk. Pardon me a second. And somebody said to her, "Can you use your psychic abilities on yourself?" And she said, "If you lose your purse, I know exactly where it is. If I lose mine, I'm done for." That she cannot use it for herself. So I can do a little bit. I've done some healing stuff like time. I bet a gash in my tongue. And I thought, oh, this is awful. And so I did work and it started healing up. It was really great. But it's somewhat limited. Yes?
Two-pronged question on your recovery. When you were in this reclusive mode, a little bit could you expound on your contemplative regeneration within yourself as a human being, as a being, and then how you went when you went back to church, what that was like.
Talk about how I...
the inner transformation
yeah.
that occurred. What happened? How did you see the world? How did you
Right.
interact with people?
How did I interact with people? Well, I tried not to, actually. But the world was a very different place now. One, now I really felt all human beings are part of the same entity. I remember riding the L. Anybody ride the L? You can meet some very interesting people on the L. I remember one day, it was one of those wacko days where it seemed like every weirdo and pervert was on the L, thinking, God really takes on some strange forms. So I really tried to integrate this idea of the things which have been revealed to me in a real practical kind of way. That first winter, for example, my car kept dying. I think I had very little money. It was a very difficult time. And the third time, the car died, and I really, literally was ready to cry. And then I thought, you idiot. 4 months ago, you were a quadriplegic. And now you're ready to cry because your car won't start? I mean, oh. It's real simple. Call a mechanic, they'll send a tow truck, they'll fix it, and somehow you pay for it. So it's just, I can't talk much more about it than just really trying to take into myself the practical consequences of what I had seen. Going back to church is weird because I've been so angry at churches for so long, but I just tried to be open and say, okay, now why am I being sent here? And to do with it what I could. And I found out that, believe it or not, in organized religion, there are a lot of techniques for meditation and prayer. They're extremely useful. I started coming across mysticism about this time. This was about 3 months after I got out of hospital. I was in the bookstore, used bookstore, and I was in the religious section for some strange reason, and I came across the Revelations of Julian of Norwich. And a voice said, buy this. So I bought it. And to my shock, she had experienced about what I had. It was utterly astonishing. For example, she said she was shown everything there was, and she didn't see hell, she didn't see purgatory, she didn't see Jews in hell for rejecting Jesus, she didn't see sin, she didn't see evil. That's what I had seen. And that's how I got started on mysticism. And when studying more and more about mysticism, I came across certain meditative practices like the Jesus Prayer and the Eastern Orthodox Church, which repeat over and over and over and over like a mantra. So I really I was reading like crazy. Mystical stuff, and then I met Neil and near-death experience stuff and healing stuff, and I just would try to incorporate as much as I could. It was both really kind of an active searching for clues and guides and help. Not that really answers the question, but it was just trying to, rather than have things as an intellectual knowledge, to incorporate in your life is the tricky part. You can know that something is right, and then when it comes to implementing it, it's all theory. I didn't want that to be the case. Yes.
Oh, I guess I'm trying to make sense of a couple of things that you said. One of which is who we think we are, right? Is ego. It's not really, that's not us. So, on the other hand, you had a life review. And it sounds like you were looking at us as we experience us. I'm trying to put those two together. Can you explain to me more about myself?
I put together that there is no real self there, there's just ego. But in the life review, it was about myself. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Repeat the question, please.
Yeah.
I guess my question is if on the one hand, we're to understand that how we experience ourselves is not us.
What we think is ourselves.
Right, but there was a life review, and that is very moving and sounds very, very important. And I guess I'm trying to put those two pieces together. I'm not understanding how those two pieces fit. So.
That's tough. That's just the way it is. Before this experience, I like to understand everything, and things had to be rational to be true. I now am extremely comfortable with ambiguity. Some things don't make sense. If things really do make perfect sense, I don't think they're true. I really don't. I think that the clearer the answer, the falser the answer is. So I wish I could really give a really snappy, clever answer.
No, that's a great answer.
But it's these things are just to be taken in isolation. And I think the worst thing, I know this is bad for people who are bent toward philosophy, the worst thing is try to come up with one integrated system that explains all things. Yes?
In context with her question, what, in your opinion, is the highest use of that ego? Apparently it's supposed to be with us here on planet Earth. So what is the higher usage?
Please repeat.
What is the highest use of the ego? Apparently, we all have it. We're stuck with it. We're supposed to have it.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do with it? Negate it.
But it's to serve us.
What purpose does it serve?
Point.
I suppose, in a way, it's sort of a self-preservation mechanism that is nice to have. I suppose when we speak of evolution, if we don't have a self-preservation instinct, we all would have just been sitting there watching lions come to eat us up or something. So I suppose it's useful. The important thing, I think, is to stop it when it stops being useful. I think mostly it gets in the way. Like now, I always hate to talk about this because it makes it sound like I've got everything figured out. I don't want it to sound, all I can do is talk about when I find things useful. So I'm not presenting myself as perfect. I'm just saying, this is how I find it. Now when I get into conflicts with people now, rather than going off of them because they have it coming, I learned that's not the right thing to do. I really try to figure out what is it am I supposed to learn from this. And what that means is you have to stop saying somebody's being rotten to me, to say what am I supposed to learn from this person being rotten to me. And if I look, there's always an answer to it. What that means is you take a lot of crap. The ego tells you not to. The ego has you fight it. The ego has you tell them off. So I think it's a matter of realizing that acting on ego is not the best way to act. Although it will end up being counterintuitive. You end up taking a lot of stuff. And your ego tells you not to take it. Stand up for yourself.
The Four Agreements was written by Routledge, who had 2 near-death experiences and wrote that book afterwards.
And what's the book?
The Four Agreements.
The Four Agreements.
And one of it is, don't take things personally, don't read into things, always do your best, and your best changes constantly. And the first one, be impeccable with your words. Would that be the highest use of ego?
That would be very good. I found one of the things that serious to me was, after this all was over with, I realized that Robert Fulton's book, Everything That I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, put that on your wall, follow it, and everything's going to be all right. Pick up after yourself. Don't leave messes. Think of other people. Don't hit. That's all you need to do, if you can do that. All that nonsense they taught in Sunday school is right. But they teach it out of the wrong basis, I think. They teach it that you do it so you go to heaven. Instead of you do it because it's right. Yes?
Leslie DeCrone, hypnotist in California, he said that 85 to 90% of all asthma is its roots cause in our birth. And if a person is regressed back into the womb or as an observer of their birth, they see the root cause, and that's the healing. So you might consider, if you still have the asthmatic attacks, you might consider going into hypnosis and regressing back to your birth experience.
Luckily, I haven't had an asthma attack since. Neil.
You've got a couple of questions. We met several years after your experience, and so I never knew what you were like. And I'm not going to ask you that question, but I'm going to ask you, are there differences in your role as a professor with regard to teaching students? Differences before and after?
Are there differences in how I teach as a result of all this?
How you teach and how you handle students?
I would like to think, yes, of course. But I think so. I really, I think I come across in my class, I have a lot of rules in my classes. I have writing assignments that I hand out 1.5 pages of instructions. And of course there's a big thing at the end about plagiarism, do not plagiarize. This is the great bane of writing in schools today. Students think that stealing from the web is research. In our department, almost everybody, if they catch somebody plagiarizing, it's an automatic failure. I can't do that. I believe in redemption. I'm sounding like a preacher now. Maybe they just don't understand, so I usually just give them a warning and let them rewrite. And so that's something different. I don't like the judgmentalism. I think it's wrong. Of course, then sometimes you get bitten by this. Last semester, a student turned in a paper, and you can just tell when students plagiarize, because there are vocabulary words you know they couldn't define if they had to. It was clearly plagiarized. In about 2 minutes on the web, I found four websites he'd stolen from. Talked with him, explained things so my armed around him, you know. You can rewrite it. Don't do this again. He turned in the second paper and he plagiarized again. Well, this time I failed him. I'm not that big an idiot, because I gave him a second chance. But that kind of thing is what I try to do. I try to be more understanding, more sympathetic. And one of the things that really bothered me, and this is typical for near-death experienced people, is you should be dead. And I had that in capital letters. When I came out of the coma, the thing which really made me mad at first was a string of people I'd never seen in my life came to me and kind of patted me and said, "You don't know how lucky you are to be alive." I was thinking, who the hell is that? These are all the nursing people that had worked on me. And this is before I realized what had happened. But once I came to a full realization, I really knew I should be dead. I should have a tombstone that said failure on it. And I was given this second chance, and I was alive for a purpose. Now, what is it? I must find it and do it. I was in a very active mode after all of this. And I couldn't find it. It drove me crazy. But finally I came to realize, I had a revelation that said, don't worry, it'll all be taken care of without you worrying. You're pretty low about it. You don't need to manage the universe. But I realized that through dealings with ordinary people, you can fulfill the reason for living. It doesn't have to be a big splashy thing. You don't have to be the Dalai Lama. You can help an old lady across the street, It's little things that really make it up. Did you have a question back here?
Yes, I did, and it was expanding on something you said. You said that you weren't the I that you previously had suspected you were or thought you were, but did you have a sense of who you were at your core? At the core of your spirit, at the core of your essence. And then you mentioned we were all part of the same entity. And I was wondering if you would expand on that.
Okay, so who is there something that we know that is the core
Of
who you are?
Who you are.
Well, I think there is something that is the core, but we wouldn't recognize it if we saw it.
Can you say more about
No,
that?
that's it. That's the little pearl of wisdom. So, in other words, we shouldn't, I think, what I got out of it is that we shouldn't concern ourselves with that, because that's not what life is about. That's all theoretical. Who we are doesn't matter. As I said, we're here to learn. And that's what our focus should be, is learning the lessons of life, rather than figuring out who we are.
Well, I guess I was trying to lead you in a certain direction. I admit
I'm not going to go there yet.
Because when anybody meditates, they tend to go within. And I call it finding the spirit within, or touching the spirit within, or touching the divine within. And then you made another comment about you got on the subway and realized that we're all part of the same entity. And so I was hoping you would expound on that, but if you don't want it, that's okay.
Well, I hate to start making things up. I could, but no. It's really, again, I think the point is there. Rather than trying to explain exactly how we all part of the same entity, I think that's all. If somebody gives you a nice, long, clear explanation, it's probably not true. I think that's all human mental activity. The point is there. We're all part of the same entity. Now act on that. It's really that simple. Rather than trying to use your intellect to take that apart. And I think normally when the intellect starts taking things apart, it's to mitigate the meaning that's there. To show we're really not all exactly the same. And so I think that's all human mental activity. It's just garbage. It should be disregarded. Here's a question. Yeah.
Yeah, the voices that you said that came to you to heal your daughter. I was wondering, do you still hear that a lot? And I mean, I know it comes in your head because I've experienced it 3 times in my life, and I don't listen to it. But
Do I still hear that voice? No, but I know a guy who still hears voices.
I mean,
It's not constant. It's kind of like Field of Dreams. From time, because like 3 times, from time to time, something comes into my head that feels like it's from outside.
yeah.
One of them I didn't, again, because I don't want to drag this out too much. One of the things that the first time the voice kind of came was when I was coming out of the coma. I kept hearing a voice, not mine, but a voice say, "God in me." Which puzzled me because I know the phrase "God with us," Emmanuel, we just passed the Advent season, but this wasn't God with us, it's God in me. And again, that was something to ponder on, what that could all mean, and I think I understand it now. So from time to time, something comes, but I don't walk around in constant conversation. Yes, back here.
Do you have anything to say about traumas? How to get rid of personal traumas that have had between the heart and the mind?
How to get rid of personal trauma?
Yeah. Between the heart and the mind, about making decisions.
Nothing more than I think what I said, which is that there's a heart trauma, which is emotional trauma. That I think that's really connected with the ego, and this heart trauma, not heart disease, but
No, the heart is connected to the ego?
yes.
Okay.
And because when you really take that kind of pain in, it's emotional pain brought about because you feel like you have been severely disappointed, you have been severely hurt, you have been betrayed, you have been let down. And that's not you.
Yeah, it's the ego.
It's the ego.
Thank you.
And that's kind of heartless. It's like telling somebody, just get over it. But it's a matter of learning that it's not personal. Not really. This was about 3 years after this event. I was associate chairman of the department, history department, and we have a number of courses that are cross-listed, that is, taught by history and another department. And we had a professor from another department who was teaching one of our courses, cross-listed in his department, and it was very badly done. We got letters of complaint signed by every student in the class explaining how badly done it was. And we forwarded the letters to this guy's own department chairman, heard nothing back. Well, the next year, he wanted to teach it again. And it was my job to do something about this, so I took it to our department chair, our department executive committee, and said, this is what's happened, it was badly done, complaints, we've heard no change, what do we do? They decided he couldn't teach it. He got outraged and demanded a meeting with the chair of the executive committee and me, and he spent the meeting for about an hour ranting at me. Personal attack, abuse, it was, and it was just venomous. And I just sat there. And then when he left, the department chair said, how could you take that? How could you take that abuse? I said, he doesn't know me. He's not mad at me. He's mad at the situation. And I am the focus of the situation. It has nothing to do with me. That really helps. And so, but sometimes it's hard to keep that kind of calm when somebody's really ranting. And I mean, this was not a little angry. He was outraged. Yes?
I was distracted for a second, but when you talked about the revelation, when you looked out and saw did you say beautiful colors when you were...
Well, the stars, the galaxies, things, it was in color. It was, three-dimensional.
And it was more like looking out into space.
If you see those pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope, which are magnificent, imagine being in the middle of that with it all three-dimensional and vibrant colors. Being with it. And then feeling a ray of connection to every single thing that you could see in the universe. That's what it was like.
Excuse me, what about the blue-gray place?
Yeah, what about that? I don't know. That's where it was. The best analogy is sometimes, if those of you, really live around here, go to the lake, and sometimes the sky and the lake are exactly the same color. It's kind of like that. Imagine this kind of even blue-gray color. That's kind of what it was like. Yes, behind there.
Yeah, and people told you that you would probably be a quite great reason since you came back. How do you feel about that? Seeing other people?
Yeah. What about people who are quadriplegics now? What like Christopher Reeve? I have no answer. The thing which still gets me is why I didn't die when my lungs stopped working, why I'm not still paralyzed. Why me? This is the big question if you read near-death literature. I don't have a clue. I really don't. And that's what often gives us, and I give, this feeling of obligation. That's one of the reasons I come and talk here, is because I feel like I was given this gift, and there's a reason for it, and maybe sharing it with people in the right situation is a good idea. And I have no idea. Why me? I have no idea. I think it must be a mistake.
You talked about when you got back on your feet, you felt the urgency to follow a meaningful purpose in your life. Do you think it's possible for people not to follow their life purpose?
Is it possible for people not to follow life purpose? Yeah. Yeah. Because I think you can reject this. Like you can reject the lessons you're supposed to learn in life. I talk about myself, find myself in what seemed like, I was in this position a year ago. It's the same situation. You find yourself in a repeating situation because you keep running away from it. You keep rejecting it. So, yeah, I think you can reject it. Now this is not something that was revealed to me. It's something I kind of think. I kind of think that before we were born, I think it's called making a contract, isn't it? You kind of come up with this is how I want my life to be so that I can learn lessons. Then you're born, and unfortunately, like Plato would say, right? We're dipped in the river of forgetting. We forgot the whole thing, and it turns out to be a big pain. It's a burden, and we run away from it. So I think, yeah, you can reject sort of what you're supposed to be doing. But I think if you do, you're just going to keep running into it again and again and again. Yeah, back here.
About the relatives and the people that I choose to like to express love, unconditional love, and that they are already in the spirit, I feel such a regret because I'm so preoccupied in my own little life, my own ego. I end up having a lot of pain because of not acting out this love, which is the reason for living to me.
That's a good one, yeah. So in terms of not giving the kind of love to your friends or family in the past?
Yeah,
and
then every time somebody goes, it's such a big pain because I cannot forget it, I carry it, but then I say I need another chance to have that love connection and to show how much I love.
Yeah.
But then it's not in this period of time anymore. How can I have a greater vision?
It's outside my area of expertise. There are places where you can go, in theory, to have meetings and conversations with the deceased.
But do you think it's all right?
So, gee, as long as you listen to what they tell you. Yeah.
Do you speak about these experiences with other faculty members where you're teaching? I mean, I find that if I do, people look at me as if I'm crazy.
Do I talk about this with other faculty members? Neil is one, but in general, no. There is something about, well, I feel somewhat protective of this. And I don't, I'm not a crusader, I'm not a missionary. So I'm not to convince anybody of anything. In fact, I was asked if Brian is still here. I don't think so. Oh, right. Brian asked me, I hope you don't mind my saying this, why do I say to skeptics? I say, fine, great. There are a lot of crazies in the world. Don't believe everything you hear. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. So I see no reason to go around, hey, let me tell you about my experience. But again, when I said earlier about the right occasion, for me this is a good occasion because obviously you're all curious and you're kind of open and accepting and you want to know about such things. But I have no desire to go and convince anybody of anything. Yes?
Did you have any concept of time when you were in this blue-gray area?
That concept of time, well, in the entire experience, there was no such thing as time. As I said, really, all of this happened kind of like at once. What I came back with was, to me, the full realization that time is an artificial concept that we have to have in this world to get by. It has no other meaning outside of this world. It's artificial. It's kind of like, remember, when I was in high school, I was in plays, and you've got kind of, act 1, act 2, act 3. It's what you need for the play. Time. Outside that play, it has no meaning whatsoever. So time doesn't really exist. I think everything happens more or less simultaneously. An analogy I like to use, we're running out of people who can understand this analogy. Time is like an LP record. You put the needle down, and it travels down this groove. It looks like a sequential groove to the needle. And really, you're just going around in circles. You're not going down a groove at all. But it's what is required for the record to play. But it has no meaning. It's false. So I really kind of think that past, present, future is kind of all one entity. And we're going down the groove in the record.
How old were you in this blue-green thing?
How old was I?
Yeah. Were you sick?
When,
were you young? Were you? I mean, what?
I was 41, whatever that is. Yes.
When you were in the hospital and came out of your coma and you started doing your energy work on your shoulder, before that experience, had you had any dealings with energy or any awareness of that, or was this like a totally foreign thing?
I had no previous experience with energy work, woo-woo stuff, nothing. In fact, I would have said, this is for idiots. I hate to say this now, I think I've mentioned this to meet with Neil. I knew nothing about mysticism, but I did, I knew that much, and I didn't like it. In my classes, I used to sneer, literally sneer, Plato was a mystic, you know. I'm sorry, Plato, I didn't know that. I knew nothing about this stuff. It just seemed, it came to me, this is what I should be doing. Yes,
Your area, your professional academic knowledge increased? Like, say, did you meet with Plato or something, some such thing?
While I was over there, I didn't meet with any entity other than this being.
Or some historical facts that are in dispute?
No, that stuff is pretty much not terribly important. Was the Battle of Tours in 732 or 733? That's not really something for the cosmos to get involved in. That's pretty insignificant. Yes?
Yes, you spoke about these broken energy patterns that you feel around a person that you're trying to heal. Do you see those energy patterns around all of us, like an aura?
About the broken energy patterns, and do I see them around?
Like an aura?
I don't see them at all. I thought, I would really love to see auras. I thought that'd be a big help. But, I don't. I'm stuck with what I got. Or be a medical intuitive like Carolyn Mays. I don't get that. All I get is I feel what I feel. And if you read about Reiki, you talk about hot spots or cold spots. I don't get hot or cold whatsoever. I get disruption that has shape. That's what I'm stuck with. So I try to work with that. Yes, in the back?
You said that after your NDE, you felt a sense of purpose. I wonder if prior to your experience, either in the immediate or over your lifetime, that you felt a sense of purpose that perhaps helped you survive that.
You all heard that, I think.
Yeah, say it
Okay. Did I have a sense of purpose before all of this happened to me? No, none. I was just drifting, My life was a monument to lack of planning, actually. And so, no, I didn't have a feeling of purpose at all. I was in the history department at UIC, and I love history, and I felt like I was doing what I love, that's a great job if you're doing what you really love. I would say I would do it without being paid. I wouldn't, but I would read history books without being paid. So no, I had no sense of purpose. Not like this. Not that my existence had meaning, and that my life had meaning. I was kind of a little angry at life, other than having a job I really enjoy. Yes, there.
Among the mystics that you study, do you have a favorite, and are there common themes that they talk about?
Oh boy, do I have a favorite mystic and are there common themes? That's a subject for that's a big topic. My favorite still is Julian of Norwich. I love Julian. I knew so little about mysticism before, I thought Julian of Norwich was a man. Well, Julian, right? It's a man's name. So she is my favorite, and there are mystics come in a number of varieties, which I try to discuss. There are some common themes that you can find. One of them is about the incomprehensibility of God, the inability of the intellect to grasp and understand God, the importance of love, the unity of all beings. That was kind of interesting because that seemed like pretty familiar stuff. You had a question?
Yeah. When you had this experience of death, was your experience familiar and recognizable?
My experience of death, was it familiar?
Yeah, with the surroundings?
No, never been that place before. Again, you're just there, you're there. And it's not, it was a feeling of being me, but it wasn't like, where the hell is this? You're there and it makes sense, it's right. And the being was over here with these feelings of power. Everything seemed right. And I didn't get beauty, except when I was off in space. So it wasn't like, the gardens and fields and flowers, and I got no dead relatives coming to meet me. I got no tunnel. First I felt kind of bad about that because everybody asked, did you see? I got no tunnel. And I thought maybe I had a NDE third category or something. And then I talked with Melvin Morris. He spoke here a couple of years ago, and he said he didn't think that was really an important part. So I thought, okay, I've gotten his approval. So I didn't get that. I honestly believe that people get the experience that they need. It's not like one for all. I think you get the experience that's meant for you. That's why they tend to be a bit different. Some people get hellish experiences, not just the pain of looking at yourself in a very harsh light, but being tortured kind of a thing. So that's why I think they do come in different categories. It's about time, isn't it? One more, maybe somebody said something. Yes?
I have a question. You talked about you know what you know now, which is different than before you had this experience, but you don't feel it's your job to get out there and preach to everybody and tell everybody. But do you feel differently about parenting your kids? Like you've got a certain something that you know just with them?
Yeah, I came back realizing I had to completely change how I was a parent. And I did it by trying to be as invisible as possible, to get out of their way, be there when they needed me, leave them the hell alone, and not direct things. It's all very Zen-like, by the way. It's amazing. There are some truths that are just truths. But that was really it, about how and amazingly, the more I backed off and left them alone, the closer we got.
Yeah.
There's a rule about this. The more you try to control them, the more they resent you and pull away. And the more you leave them alone and be there to nurture them and help them when they want help, the closer you'll be. That was a wonderful revelation. Thank you all for letting me come.